Hey, what's going on, guys? I thought I'd quickly jump in before this video starts to let you know that the build in real time is this close to being finished. I've just absolutely neglected the editing side of things. So you guys know I'm not bullshitting you. This is how much video footage I have accumulated over the past however many months. So I have over 417 gigs worth of video footage. And this is just one folder. Yeah, I haven't really been able to dedicate heaps of time to solely finishing this build, so there is absolutely zero continuity throughout any of the videos because it's just been filmed over multiple days, multiple weeks, even multiple months. So you'll be able to see in this video how many costume changes there have been. Literally wearing a different t-shirt in every cut. But just thought I'd use this opportunity just to plug the new Instagram. I'm going to separate it from my personal account. So give this one a follow and you'll be able to see live updates on the build and whatever I've got planned in the future. I do have quite a few things planned, so be sure to hit that subscribe button and definitely give that Instagram account a follow. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Today is a good day. Fuck, bad idea. Today is a good day. I'm so excited. I just picked up all the parts from the machine shop. So I've got all my forged pistons, rods, I've got my block. Everything's ready to go and ready to assemble. I'm so excited. I've been waiting for this day for weeks. Everything's finally done. Everything's pretty much measured and tolerance ready to put in. The only thing I have to do is do the piston ring gaps, but just for safe measures, I'm probably going to double check some things just to make sure everything is in top shape. So it looks so much better than what it did before. It's so much cleaner. There's no more rust in the coolant passages. They have decked the block to fit a MLS head gasket. Maybe they decked the head. No, they decked the block to fit an MLS head gasket, because you don't deck a head. It's been acid dipped, hydro bathed, I think that's what it's called. I have no idea on any of the technical terms, but all I know is that I've got to give it a big wash with degreaser and brake cleaner, and then I'm ready to start putting it all together. I'm going to put in all the Welsh plugs, put in the rear main seal. So this is just an absolute bare block. They did hand me back a bag of bolts, which I assume came out of here, and I'm not 100% sure where some of those parts came from, but I guess that's a part of the whole experience. I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing, but that's why I really enjoy it, because I'm learning and I'm taking you guys on the journey, and I want to try and show that it's absolutely possible to do this yourself, and it'll be a lot more satisfying once you've gone through this whole process, rebuilding a whole engine from the ground up, and you go to turn that key for the first time, and you know that you've put in all the hard work into getting that car running. So without any further ado, let's get cracking. Okay, so everything is cleaned. I did go through earlier with some compressed air and blow out all the oil journals. So now what we're going to do is we're going to install these Welsh plugs. The little brass plugs that literally sit here in these holes of the engine. And if you forget to put these in, you're going to have a very bad time when you fill the car up with coolant. Now the process is pretty simple. Pretty much what you need to do is, before you install anything on this block, you need to pretty much just clean it. Even though we did clean it before, stuff is always going to be falling and landing on the block. So before you set anything into stone, you want to make sure that you clean it up with some degreaser. Now with these Welsh plugs, what we need to do is take some of this Welsh plug sealant, put it around the edge, find a socket that is pretty much the same size as this internal diameter, place it there, and slowly tap it in with a hammer. You can't see where I'm pointing on the engine. You want to place it in one of the holes and slowly tap it in with a hammer, and that's your Welsh plugs done. It should be flush. All the Welsh plugs are in, and I've let them sit for over 24 hours now, so stuff should be all set now. It takes about 24 hours for it to fully cure. So its engine is slowly coming together. So I thought it was a good idea, before we start installing everything, I may as well show you guys what I have in store for the engine. So this is what I have. This is sort of like the parts corner. So there is a bunch of stuff here. So first of all, we got the Ross Racing pistons. I was gonna grab CP pistons, but there was supply issues, so I ended up going with Ross Racing pistons. A lot of the Barra, all the V8 guys, some of the RB guys use these. I'm not pushing a great amount of power, so I'm sure that these will be absolutely fine for what I'm building the engine for. At the end of the day, they're still forged pistons and they're not cheap Chinese crap, so I'm sure they'll do the job. We have my machined flywheel, my balanced crank. I have some spool rods, some ARP head studs. In here is my oil pump and the hoses from hell. I have my freshly cleaned sump and oil pickup. I have my torque wrench because I didn't have one of those before. I have a full top end MLS head gasket set. Up here I have some miscellaneous nuts and bolts that came off of my block. I have just some front main and rear main seals. I have standard ACL race bearings, a new water pump, even though that was recently replaced. I'm going to do it anyway. I have this gear shift surround because mine is cracked in my car, which you guys actually haven't seen the actual car yet, but that is coming soon, I promise. Oh, this is my AEM AFR reader, so my digital fuel ratio gauge, I guess. I have a thermostat, and then an oil catch can. The only thing I'm missing is a clutch, but I have something sorted out for that. Something should be on its way very soon. I'm going completely overboard on the type of clutch that I'm going to be putting in. But then that would just give me a little bit of flexibility on what type of power I can throw down if I do want to go a little bit more power in the future. Also, I did manage to find a little bit of a gem at the wreckers. If anybody knows old Toyotas, you guys know that the dashes on them are absolutely terrible because they just are known to crack, warp, and all the above. I managed to actually find a pretty decent one from the wreckers, which only cost me $100. So as you'll see in my car, it's absolutely rooted. So we're going to be replacing that in a future video. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to double check some of the measurements just to make sure that the piston to cylinder clearance is all good. I'm just going to use a set of calipers because I don't have any micrometers. I think that's what they're called, like cylinder ball micrometers. So I'm just going to use one of these just to make sure that everything is within spec. It's not going to be as accurate as possible, but because the machine shop did everything, I'm just going to make sure that everything is close enough, because I doubt anything will be way out of spec. So I'm going to do that really quickly, and then we can start doing the cylinder rings, the cylinder ring gaps, and then we can start to assemble the good stuff. Alright, so I've measured everything out with a set of calipers. It's not going to be super accurate, but it will give me a good idea based on all the measurements I already have. So each bore measures at 86.51 millimeters, which is 3.4059 inches. If we come and have a look at the specs of the piston, the bore size for the piston is 3.406 inches. So that's pretty much the same thing, just round that up. And so the size of the piston is 86.45 mils, which is 3.4035 inches. And so the difference, the tolerance there is 0.002 inches. So that is quite small, but looking at all the spec sheets and what the tolerances can be, that is well within spec. And I do know that the machine shop did pretty much nearly blueprint this engine, where everything, it has the smallest tolerances possible. I went to a reputable engine shop, so I fully trust their measurements. Okay, so the process for this is pretty easy. All you really need to know how to do is how to read instructions and how to use some feeler gauges. So each piston comes with a set of rings. We want to open this box and take out our first ring, because they should all be in order. Top ring. Place it in the first cylinder that you want to measure, ideally cylinder 1. Bend it a little bit. Put it in there vertically. Slide it a little bit down into the cylinder wall. Then rotate it. Then you want to grab your relevant piston and just square it off down there. And then in there you can see that little bit of a gap. You need to make sure that that gap measures up with the gap specifications on the instruction manual. So in our instance, we need to multiply the size of the bore by our relative type of application. So ours would be a turbo/nitro car. So we'd be measuring, multiplying the size of the bore by 0.0050. So I've already done all the calculations up here. So the gap of the first top ring should be 0.017. Now this is where you whip out your set of feeler gauges, and we need to find 0.017. We're going to whack that in there, and that is the ring gap is way too small. So we're going to pull the ring out, and I'll take you over to the workbench. So essentially what we have here is a piston ring gap tool. We want to take our ring, place it along here, make sure the ring is nice and square on the tool, hold it down nice and firmly, and just take a little bit of that off, and we'll just rinse and repeat until it's the right size. So I finished doing the first ring gap, and as you can see, this feeler gauge slides in there quite perfectly. So that's that one done. Now we're going to move over to the second ring. Okay, so one thing you can't forget to do is you want to take a small file and just get rid of any of the burrs that are left on the side that you filed down, because you don't want any sharp edges being installed into the engine. Now once you've done that, you want to put it back in the box that it came out of, and then mark that box with the cylinder number that you just measured. And now on to number 2. Okay, so now that everything is all prepped, we can finally start assembling the good stuff. So before we can start assembling the crank, we need to install these. They pretty much sit in the cylinder and provide oil to each cylinder. So I'm just going to make sure that these all work, just by putting a little pin in the ball bearing, just to make sure that it does have some movement. And then again, I'm going to clean everything with degreaser, brake cleaner actually, and then I'll torque those down to spec, then we can start doing the crank. Okay, so now that all those are in, we can start installing the crank. Okay, so now we're gonna pop in the bearings now that everything's clean. There are two types of bearings. Ones that have no notch in them, and then the others do have a sort of a notch down the middle. These ones, the ones with the notch, need to go in the block, and the other ones need to go on the end caps. So this is where our assembly lubes are going to come in handy, and we're going to take our thrust bearings, these ones, the ones without the notches on without the protrusion on the top, and we're going to install these next to the third main bearing with the oil grooves facing outwards. It's a good idea to whack some assembly lube on the inside of them. It will just hold it against the block until we pop the crank in. So now we want to also apply a thick coat of assembly lube to all the bearings that we just popped in. Grab the crank and lube up all of the main bearings on here, again with some assembly lube. So now that the crank's all lubed up, we can just drop it into place. Sweet. And now we can pretty much go ahead and we just need to pop the bearings in the end caps and then torque everything down to spec. Okay, so now that all of the end cap bearings are in, I'm just going to lube each one up and place it back in the engine, making sure that the tang on this bearing lines up with the tang on the other bearing. Also, don't forget the thrust washers on end cap number 3, again with the oil galleries facing outwards. So what the manual recommends doing is applying a little bit of engine oil to each of the bolts, to the thread of each of the bolts, just to ensure that it doesn't grab and that you can get a more accurate torque spec. If I can get this package open, I have some bolt lube that came with my ARP head studs, so I doubt I'll use all of this on the head studs, so I'm going to use a little bit of it on the end cap bolts. So I've just torqued them up at 20 foot-pounds, and I'm going to slowly work my way up to the 45 that the machine shop suggests. So that's everything torqued down to spec, so now we're just going to make sure that it rotates.